The HOA had called the cops on my trucks, claiming they had no right to use the road. They were about to learn who actually owned that road. Those trucks weren't random vehicles. They were part of my growing business. Every one of them used a private road to reach my property. The HOA president started watching my trucks every time they passed nearby. Soon, she began treating my business like it was her personal problem. One afternoon, she handed me a warning telling me the trucks were not appropriate. I calmly reminded her that my property was outside the HOA's control. Instead of arguing, I checked the property records and boundaries myself. The road was clearly identified as my privately owned access road. The evidence was sitting right there at the entrance. The road wasn't a public HOA road. It was my private access road. But the HOA president wasn't satisfied with paperwork. She decided the next step was calling law enforcement about my trucks. A few minutes later, 3 sheriff's deputies arrived at my property. I walked toward them, expecting a serious accusation. The lead deputy asked me whether the trucks belonged to me. I told him yes, and explained that they were being operated on my own property. The HOA president insisted the trucks were violating neighborhood rules. Then she made one mistake. She claimed the road belonged to the HOA. The deputy calmly asked her to show him the document proving the HOA owned the road. Suddenly, her confidence started disappearing. She searched through her paperwork, but couldn't produce anything proving ownership. The deputies began looking at the situation very differently. I showed the deputies a recorded survey and property boundary map. The private road was clearly inside my parcel. The deputies walked the road themselves and examined the entrance. There was nothing suggesting the HOA owned or controlled it. The gate and signage matched the property records perfectly. The deputies now understood why my trucks were legally using the road. The woman who had arrived demanding action was suddenly standing without an argument. Her entire complaint had fallen apart. The deputy explained that HOA rules didn't automatically give them authority over privately owned property. The conversation had completely changed direction. Once everything was clear, my trucks continued their normal route. For the first time, the HOA couldn't stop them with a phone call. She could only stand there and watch my truck drive away. The deputies had made the ownership issue clear. The deputies weren't there to take sides. They were there to understand the facts. Once they had the facts, there was nothing more for them to do. After they left, I organized every document related to property. I wanted everything ready in case the HOA tried the same argument again. That evening, the HOA board had to discuss what happened. Their original complaint had been based on an incorrect assumption. The board reviewed the same property boundaries I had shown the deputies. The private road was unmistakably outside their authority. The board finally accepted that my private road wasn't theirs to regulate. The confrontation had reached its logical conclusion. A few days later, the road was quiet again. My trucks came and went without another unnecessary confrontation. My business continued growing, just as it had before the HOA got involved. The private road remained an important part of my daily operations. Eventually, even the HOA president had to accept the reality. Those trucks weren't violating her authority because the road wasn't hers. Sometimes the most important boundary is the one people refuse to read. Mine had been clearly marked from the beginning. I never needed to fight the HOA. I simply stood on the facts, showed the records, and let the truth speak for itself. And that's how the HOA learned that calling the cops doesn't change who owns a road. Like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from.